Welcome to Mayhem CDH, where questionable decks meet questionable pilots. For this week, we're jamming some more Canlander, and this time Evan's poor Wilhelt deck won't get obliterated by an actual Canlander deck. With that being said, let's check out our players today. First, we have Josh on Bant Affinity, an artifact deck that seeks to turbo out fast mana, cheap artifact creatures, and win with hard beats. And Craft on Blue-Red Tempo, a tempo deck that seeks to stop key plays, generate card advantage, and win with powerful late-game threats. And now, with each pilot in their respective corner of the screen, let us begin. And for those of you in the Ames area, stick around to find out how you can get 10% off your next Mayhem Ames purchase. Josh plays a Thornglint Bridge tapped, a Mox Sapphire, a Mox Opal, and an Esper Sentinel. Josh passes. Craft draws, plays an Arid Mesa, and passes. Josh draws and moves to combat, attacking Craft with Sentinel. Craft takes the hit, and in his second main phase, Josh plays a Tolarian Academy, an Etch Champion, and passes. Craft draws, plays a Flooded Strand, and passes. Josh draws and moves to combat, attacking Craft with Sentinel and Champion. Craft takes the hit, and in his second main phase, Josh plays the Ozolith and casts Walking Ballista, where X equals 4. In response, Craft cracks his fetches, paying 2 life, fetching up an Island and Volcanic Island onto the battlefield. He casts Force Spike, paying for Sentinel, countering Ballista. Josh passes. Craft draws, plays a Fiery Islet, and passes. Josh draws, plays a Silver Bluff Bridge, and moves to combat, attacking Craft with Sentinel and Champion. Craft takes the hit, and at the end of turn, Craft casts Searing Spear, paying for Sentinel, killing Sentinel. The turn moves to Craft. Craft draws and plays Ancestral Recall, targeting himself, drawing 3 cards. He plays an Electrostatic Infantry and casts Gush, returning 2 islands to his hand, giving Electrostatic Infantry a +1/+1 counter, and draws 2 cards. He replays Volcanic Island and passes. Josh draws and casts Dispatch, exiling Electrostatic Infantry, moves to combat, and attacks Craft with Champion. Craft takes the hit, and Josh passes. Craft draws, plays an island, and casts Ethereal Forager, delving away Gush, Searing Spear, and Force Spike. Craft passes. Josh draws, plays a Scrapyard Recombiner, and moves to combat, attacking Craft with Champion. Craft takes the hit, and Josh passes. Craft draws, plays a Riverglide Pathway, and moves to combat, attacking Josh with Forager, returning Searing Spear to his hand. Josh takes the hit, and in his second main phase, Craft casts Suspend, exiling Scrapyard Recombiner with 2 time counters. Craft passes. At the beginning of his upkeep, Josh removes a time counter from Recombiner. He draws, moves to combat, and attacks Craft with Champion. Craft takes the hit, and in his second main phase, Josh casts Phyrexian Metalmorph, entering as a copy of Etch Champion, and at the end of Josh's turn, Craft cracks Fiery Islet, drawing a card. The turn moves to Craft. Craft draws, plays an island, and moves to combat, attacking Josh with Forager, returning Gush to his hand. Josh takes the hit, and Craft passes. At the beginning of his upkeep, Josh removes the last time counter from Scrapyard Recombiner and casts it. In response, Craft casts Cryptic Command, countering Recombiner and tapping Josh's creatures. Josh draws, plays a Thopter Foundry, and passes. Craft draws, plays a Cascade Bluffs, and moves to combat, attacking Josh with Forager, returning Force Spike to his hand. Josh takes the hit, and in his second main phase, Craft floats mana and casts Gush, returning 2 islands to his hand and drawing 2 cards. Finding no answers, Craft sees the writing on the wall, and Josh wins the game. Craft plays a Polluted Delta and passes. Josh draws and plays Urza Saga. It enters and moves to Chapter 1. He plays a Mox Sapphire, a Stonecoil Serpent where X equals 2, and at the end of turn, Craft cracks his Polluted Delta, paying a life, fetching up an island onto the battlefield. He casts Consider, surveilling the top card, and drawing. The turn moves to Craft. Craft draws, plays a Fiery Islet, plays a Young Pyromancer, and passes. Josh draws and Urza Saga moves to Chapter 2. He plays an Adarkar Waste and moves to combat, attacking Craft with Stonecoil. Craft takes the hit, and Josh passes. Craft draws, plays an island, plays Dreadhorde Arcanist, and at the end of turn, Josh activates Urza Saga, creating a Karnstruct. The turn moves to Josh. Josh draws and Urza Saga moves to Chapter 3. In response, Josh activates Saga, creating a Karnstruct, sacrifices Saga, and fetches up a Mox Opal onto the battlefield. He plays a Glimmer Void, a Gearseeker Serpent, and moves to combat, attacking Craft with a Karnstruct and Stonecoil. In response, Craft casts Ancestral Recall, targeting himself, creating a 1/1 Elemental through Pyro, and drawing 3 cards. Craft trumps with the Elemental, blocks with Dreadhorde, and Josh passes. Craft draws, plays a Mountain, and casts Careful Study, creating an Elemental through Pyro, drawing 2 and discarding 2, and passing. Josh draws and plays Tireless Tracker. He follows it up with a Tree of Tails, creating a clue token through Tracker, and moves to combat, attacking Craft with the Karnstructs and Gearseeker. Before blocks, Craft casts Petty Theft, creating an Elemental through Pyro, bouncing Gearseeker Serpent. He chumps the Karnstructs with Elementals, and in his second main phase, Josh casts Steel Overseer and passes. Kraft draws, plays a volcanic island, casts Incinerate, creating an elemental through Pyro, destroying Seal Overseer, and following it up with a Searing Spear, creating an elemental through Pyro, killing Tireless Tracker. He moves to combat and attacks Josh with Dreadhorde, casting Ancestral Recall from his graveyard, targeting himself, creating an elemental through Pyro, drawing 3 cards. Josh blocks with Stone Coil and Kraft passes. Josh draws, plays a Mishra's Factory, recasts Gear Seeker Serpent, and cracks his clue, drawing a card. He casts Swords to Plowshares, targeting Young Pyromancer. In response, Kraft casts Spell Pierce, creating an elemental through Pyro, countering Swords. He moves to combat and attacks Kraft with 2 Constructs. Kraft chumps with Elementals, and Josh passes. Kraft draws, plays a Misty Rainforest, and casts Ethereal Forger, delving away Searing Spear, Incinerate, Consider, and Spell Pierce. Kraft passes. Josh draws, plays an Adventurer's Fair, and moves to combat, attacking Kraft with both Constructs and Gear Seeker Serpent. Kraft chumps Gear Seeker with an Elemental, and before damage, cracks his Misty Rainforest, paying a life and fetching up an island onto the battlefield. He casts Prismari Command, creating an Elemental through Pyro, destroying a Construct, drawing 2, and discarding 2. Still before damage, Kraft delves away some graveyard to cast Magmatic Sinkhole, creating Elemental through Pyro, targeting the other Construct. In response, Josh activates Mishra's Factory, making it an artifact creature, buffing the Construct. Kraft takes the hit, and Josh passes. Kraft draws and plays the Royal Scions, upticking them, giving Dreadhorde Arcanist +2/+0 and First Strike. He moves to combat and attacks Josh with Dreadhorde, recasting Prismari Command, creating an elemental through Pyro, destroying Josh's Construct, drawing 2 and discarding 2. In his second main phase, Kraft plays a Bloodstained Mire, and at the end of turn, Josh activates Adventure's Fair, sacrificing it and fetching up a Sword of the Meek into his hand. The turn moves to Josh. Josh draws, plays a Mishra's Workshop, plays Sword of the Meek, a Thopter Foundry, and at the end of turn, Kraft cracks his Bloodstained Mire, paying a life and fetching up a mountain onto the battlefield. He cracks his Fiery Islet, drawing a card, and the turn moves to Kraft. Kraft draws and upticks the Scions, drawing a card and discarding a card. He moves to combat and attacks Josh with Forager, returning Consider to his hand. Josh takes the hit, and in his second main phase, Kraft casts Consider, surveilling and drawing a card. He delves his graveyard to cast Murktide Regent, entering with 5 +1/+1 counters, and at the end of turn, Josh sacrifices Sword of the Meek to Thopter Foundry, creating a 1/1 Thopter with flying and having Sword return to the battlefield equipped to the Thopter. He does this 3 more times, creating 3 more Thopters. Missing his life gain, magic is hard sometimes. The turn moves to Josh. Josh draws, plays a Blinkmoth Nexus, activates Gear Seeker Serpent, making it unblockable, and moves to combat, attacking Kraft with Gear Seeker and 4 Thopters. Before it blocks, Kraft casts Snap, creating an elemental through Pyro, bouncing Gear Seeker Serpent, and untapping 2 lands. Still before it blocks, he casts Lightning Bolt, creating an elemental through Pyro, killing the Thopter equipped with Sword of the Meek. He blocks the Thopter with Murktide, takes the rest, and Josh passes. Kraft draws and upticks the Scions, drawing and discarding a card. He moves to combat and attacks Josh with everything, returning Searing Spear to his hand through Forager, and casting Lightning Bolt with Dreadhorde, creating an elemental through Pyro, dealing 3 to Josh. In response, Josh activates Thopter Foundry, sacrificing Sword of the Meek, creating a Thopter equipped with Sword of the Meek. Still before blocks, Kraft casts Searing Spear, killing Josh's Thopter. With no answers, Josh takes the hit, and Kraft wins the game. Josh plays a Treasure Vault, the Ozolith, and passes. Kraft draws, puts a Steam Vents into play untapped, paying 2 life, plays a Dragon's Rage Channeler, and pays 2 life to cast Gataxian Probe, surveilling through Channeler. He looks at Josh's hand, draws, and passes. Josh draws, plays a Karakas, a Mox Diamond, discarding land as it enters, and plays a Dig Site Engineer. Josh passes. Kraft draws and casts Brainstorm, surveilling through Channeler, drawing 3 and putting 2 back on top. He plays a Prismatic Vista and passes. Josh draws, plays a Mishra's Factory, and plays Ornithopter, paying 2 and creating a Construct through Dig Site. He casts Memnite, creating a Construct through Dig Site. In response, Kraft cracks Prismatic Vista, paying a life and fetching up an island onto the battlefield. He casts Force Spike, countering Memnite, and Josh passes. Kraft draws, plays Wasteland, and sacrifices Wasteland, destroying Josh's Mishra's Factory. He delves his graveyard to cast Murktide Regent, entering with 4 +1/+1 counters, and passes. Josh draws, and passes. Kraft draws and casts Faithless Looting, surveilling through Channeler, drawing 2 and discarding 2. He plays a Mountain, a Young Pyromancer, and passes. Josh draws, plays a Blinkmoth Nexus, and moves to combat, attacking Kraft with both Constructs. Kraft takes the hit, and Josh passes. Kraft draws and plays Expressive Iteration, surveilling through Channeler, creating an elemental through Pyro, looking at the top 3, putting 1 into his hand, 1 onto the bottom of his library, and exiles and plays Misty Rainforest. Kraft passes. Josh draws and plays Skull Clamp. He equips Skull Clamp to Ornithopter and moves to combat, attacking Kraft with both Constructs. Before it blocks, Kraft casts Suspend, surveilling through Channeler, creating an elemental through Pyro, exiling a Construct. He chumps the other Construct with an Elemental, and at the end of turn, Craft cracks his Misty Rainforest, paying a life and fetching him an island onto the battlefield. He casts Ancestral Recall, surveilling through Channeler, creating an Elemental through Pyro, drawing 3 cards, and wondering if he shuffled correctly, the turn moves to Craft. Craft draws, plays a Spire Bluff Canal tapped, and moves to combat, attacking Josh with Murktide. Josh blocks with Ornithopter, triggering Skull Clamp, and in response, Craft casts Stifle, surveilling through Channeler, creating Elemental through Pyro, countering the Skull Clamp trigger. Craft passes. Josh draws, activates Blinkmoth Nexus, making it a creature, and equips it to Skull Clamp. In response, Craft casts Incinerate, killing Digside Engineer. Blinkmoth dies and Josh draws 2 from Skull Clamp. He plays an Inkmoth Nexus, equips Skull Clamp to the Construct, and passes. Craft draws and casts Burst Lightning, surveilling through Channeler, creating an Elemental through Pyro, and dealing 2 to Josh. He follows it up with a Stormwing Entity, scrying 2 as it enters, and moves to combat, attacking Josh with Murktide. Josh takes the hit, and Craft passes. Josh draws, plays a Scrapyard Recombiner, and passes. Craft draws and plays Prismari Command, surveilling through Channeler, creating an Elemental through Pyro, giving Stormwing +1/+1, dealing 2 damage to Scrapyard Recombiner, killing it, and destroying the Ozolith. He moves to combat and attacks Josh with Murktide and Stormwing. Before damage, Josh casts Swords to Plowshares. In response, Craft delves some of his graveyard to cast Logic Knot, surveilling through Channeler, creating an Elemental through Pyro, giving Stormwing +1/+1, and countering Swords. Out of answers, Josh takes the hit, dies, and Craft wins the match. For those of you in the Ames area who stuck around, come to Mayhem Comics and Ames this week and ask for the YouTube discount. You'll be asked the question, who won? Answer correctly and get 10% off your purchase. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to catch future videos, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.